Well, joining me now to discuss the future of BP and its CEO, Tony Hayward, is one of two analysts with a sell recommendation on BP, Dougie Youngson. He is an analyst at Arbuthnot Securities. Dougie, thanks very much for coming back in. You came in to see me a few weeks ago and you just changed your recommendation to a sell from a buy. Are you feeling quite confident that you made the right move now?
I think I've been borne out by the circumstances.
Yeah.
You know, the sell was the right move at the right time.
And so the share price has fallen how much since you decided to...
Over 20%.
Right. Now, looking, obviously you're keeping a very close eye on what's happening, and there are almost two separate stories here, aren't there? There's the actual oil, and then there's this whole political dividend, Tony Hayward bashing story that's bubbling away as well.
I think the political aspect to this is actually more frightening than the well itself. You know, ultimately the well will be capped, but the political fallout from this will go on for much, much longer.
And is that what you're keeping an eye on now? We can actually see those pictures of the oil coming out of the burst pipes. We have been hearing as well that there is that the scientists, American scientists, saying that there's an awful lot more oil than there was. Do you think that, in a way, in financial terms, that it's easier to quantify the environmental damage and the claims that BP is likely to face rather than the political concerns?
I think both are very, very difficult. Today's upgrade in the flow rate was, you know, an unwelcome surprise ultimately, but it just goes to show that we really can't quantify the ultimate scale of the oil slick and therefore the long-term liabilities in terms of clean-up and fines, etc.
So when you look at the price, is there a level in your head that you think, well, if it fell to £4, I'd buy it?
I think psychologically, if anything falls in price by 50%, there's that perception of a bargain being there. But I think the market is being a little bit premature in terms of calling it a buy at these sorts of levels because there's still far too many unknowns. The well still hasn't been capped, and really that's the first step in what will be a very, very lengthy process.
In terms of the political fallout, do you think that the British politicians should become involved? Do you see this as BP, or as the Americans now like to call it, British petroleum bashing?
I think the Brit bashing is probably, you know, is quite a worrying aspect. But at the end of the day, you have to remember that BP really is an American company these days. More than 2/3 of the staff are actually American. And, you know, I think Obama hasn't quite realised how American BP actually is.
Oh, and indeed, the other thing that BP has done is really taken on the chin full responsibility for this, but companies like Halliburton have played their part and are obviously trying to keep their role much smaller in all of this.
Absolutely, but at the end of the day, you have to remember Halliburton is actually an American company, and that's probably the reason why it hasn't quite been in the limelight so much. Ultimately, we don't know whose responsibility this actually is, and that will come out in the investigations. But clearly, BP, being managing the well situation, you know, has a large part to play in this.
And looking in a bit of a broader light at this sector as a whole, Obama is talking very tough on regulation, on offshore drilling. America still wants oil. It's got a huge appetite to consume oil. It doesn't seem to be putting any kind of a cap on that. Is President Obama, in the end, going to make it much more difficult for companies to drill around the coast of America?
I think that inevitably they will have to make it a lot more stringent in terms of permitting and licensing. But you're right, you know, the Gulf of Mexico is a huge contributor to the US energy mix. It's right on the doorstep. They can't be too punitive in the measures, otherwise people just won't invest in the region. And
do you think that in the end, then, we're going to see the whole sector taking a hit, or will it bounce back fairly quickly?
I think inevitably any new legislation will hit everyone active in the sector. It'll be interesting to see what happens overseas. The UK is already looking at deep water drilling. Potentially that could happen offshore Brazil and West Africa as well.
Just on BP, the dividend, do you see that as a big issue now, or do you think those people who really needed the dividend have already priced that in and sold off if they had to?
The dividend will always be a big issue. It sounds like the Americans could even go to the lengths of going down the legal route to make sure that the dividend's blocked. It'll be interesting to see how all that pans out. OK. Well,
Dougie Youngson, thank you very much indeed for coming in. I think last time you came in, I said, well, you come back and justify your position. You've managed to do that very well there. Hopefully you'll come back and see us again. Thanks very much.